We're back again. Okay, so welcome. This is a meeting of the CPGB-ML, the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. You can see our excellent works at such places as www.thecommunists.org, and still, if you prefer, you can go to cpgb-ml.org so you can see our website. Today we are launching a book of one of our comrades, Giles Shorter, who's written this fantastic book. We've had a presentation, a brief introduction by me, and by my comrade Richie, talking about our work in the anti-war movement. In the current climate, a lot of people were thrown. I, for one, having seen Russia's forbearance in the face of provocation after provocation for at least, 15, maybe 20 years, even in the face of this it was clear that another wave of war was coming to the Donbass. I genuinely thought, before the outbreak of the conflict, that Russia wouldn't go in. It was full of it. The news was full of it, wasn't it? Russia's going to invade Ukraine. Look at where their troops are. And it was still, despite all of that, a surprise because of their forbearance in the face of provocation over years. But once I kind of recovered and restabilised from that, I could see that actually this was precisely what was necessary in the face of such a massive war drive against them. Yeah. And that therefore, they were essentially fighting a just war. A lot of people have difficulty saying that Putin's war, so-called, is a just war, that Russia's war is a just war, that it's an anti-imperialist war, particularly because we were great friends of the Soviet Union. We saw the Soviet Union as the future of humanity. So to see it overthrown and subsumed, for at least certainly under Yeltsin's time, by gangster capitalism and the advancements and the achievements of the people being taken away, the resurgence of nationalism, where there used to be real fraternal harmony, brotherly love, proletarian internationalism, was a living embodiment of a future world. And to see under the new economic forces that broken apart and fratricidal strife re-emerge, Nagorno-Karabakh, republics breaking away, nationalism in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, right? Latvia a little while ago, beautiful Soviet statues. I mean, there's a persistent policy of breaking them down. Statue to the Red Army soldier in their harbours. Well, it's monumental and beautiful, and they're taking them down. So this kind of anti-Soviet campaign, the anti-Soviet EU laws, all of that makes us feel like there's an irrevocable loss. But it's always been the position of our party that this is a temporary setback. It was a defeat in an overall class conflict which is waging and which we're still participants in. And within that context, it's very much in our interest that NATO imperialism is weakened and defeated, and the resurgent fascist proxy armies that they're using to wage this battle in Ukraine are weakened and defeated. So that was the essence of our position. That's why we think, as Richie Brown was saying, as we pursue our anti-war work, we have to take that message. We stand for the victory of Russia in this war. Yeah. That's also the victory of the progressive forces in Ukraine, the victory of the communist forces in Ukraine. Forget. Support not only from the human but the canine participants in the meeting. We're grateful, first of all. The communists within Russia and within Ukraine.
We agree with you.
Very, very interestingly, the Communist Party of Ukraine was a major electoral force in the last elections. They had tens of members of parliament and something like 15% of the vote. They're a major force. They've been outlawed. People go on about this, the fight of democracy against the evil Putin and dictatorship. It's a total farce. The most cursory look at the actions of Zelensky show that. He's outlawed every opposition. He's now said there won't be any presidential elections until after the war. So there's a literal dictatorship in Ukraine, even though he's a puppet of a local billionaire called Kolomoisky. Yeah? Selected as a, and there's a nice article on that as well. Who is Zelensky? Beautiful bit of appendix. Who is Zelensky? His history. Very interesting to see. He's a stand-up comedian, was successful, Then they put him on shows. Then he was, sponsored by Kolomoisky's media agency. Then all of his friends are media people, and they took him directly out. Who does he play? Servant of the people. They make up this fiction that Ukraine, with all of its troubles, can be lifted back out by a simple, humble teacher who, just through his common sense approach and being a decent bloke, sorts Ukraine out and puts things back as they used to be. Not mentioning that, as they used to be, the good old days was Soviet bloody Union. Yeah? And what do they do instead? They say, oh no, we're going to bring peace. His big policy was a push for peace. Zelensky was going to bring peace. Very quickly, how did he become the presidential candidate? Kolomoisky, who was in exile, because the last billionaire, President Poroshenko, is a rival billionaire group. Poroshenko is incidentally the person who, Kolomoisky, is the person who, despite being himself Jewish and a practicing Jew, having dual citizenship and now being exiled in Israel, though he has a lot to say about what happens in Ukraine, sponsored Zelensky. Zelensky had to go meet him to become a candidate, and they sponsored him and they pushed him forward. You can be, and they did it even as his show, the last episode of this Servant of the People, is running. So the TV show, in conjunction with this kind of puppet candidate, is all giving propaganda of, he's going to sort it out through common sense policies. Kolomoisky, despite being a practicing Jew now living in Israel, is the person who brought back, they abolished the law saying you couldn't have private armies. So he built up his own private army to protect his private business interests, which is looting certain aspects. Despite the fact there's a fire sale of assets and they've destroyed the country, some of these billionaires become incredibly wealthy. He started his own private army. Where do you find this private army of young, disgruntled men who will commit great crimes? They need some ideology. What's the ideology of imperialism, racism, supremacy? What's the ideology that they use there? Banderite fascism. So Kolomoisky, the practicing Jew, who put Zelensky, the Jew who therefore can't be fascist because he's a Jew, this is the propaganda, they put in power, and they created the army that went on to become the Azov Battalion, which openly wears fascist swastikas, Nazi insignia, wolf sangles, every SS Galician, OUN openly promotes the direct fascist ideology, which read Mein Kampf. When they go into their camps, they can see that they're being fed on this poisonous ideology, started and promoted by the devout Jewish billionaire Kolomoisky. Because when you're a billionaire, you're declassed. You don't give a damn about your people. You don't give a damn about religion. You don't give a damn about ethics. You give a damn about your business interests. And so if you strip away all the ideology, what you're doing is you're fighting for your personal business interests and damn the interests of the population, and you give them whatever thin gruel of culture will motivate them to kill themselves. And they actually took the fascist armies, and even though they themselves were not good enough fighters, they distributed them like a political police amongst the whole of the state and the whole of the army. They took over the police. And this struggle to take over the Ukrainian state is documented. They literally, after the overthrow in 2014 of the coup, they sent so-called freedom trains, they commandeered trains, they sent these fascist private armies to go and impose the will of the fascist proxy forces on the towns who refused to go along with the coup. That was the time when Crimea had its referendum. It's also the time when the Donbass, Lugansk and Donetsk had their referendums and started to organize their people's militia to resist, and in fact defeated the Ukrainian army, which overall was demoralized. So they found this way of gradually strengthening ideologically the army, reinforcing it with ultra-nationalism. And they've also, learned that lesson in order to literally have units of the army who prevent the rest of the army from retreating. So they're forced to think, how the hell do they sustain these battles when they're sending tens of thousands of people day after day to their deaths? We really are using this wave tactics of the Ukrainians against far superior technological and organisation firepower of the Russians. So it's a mass slaughter. And if you look at real statistics, maybe 300,000, maybe 400,000 Ukrainian soldiers have lost their lives. That's massive. It means that the initial army Ukraine had has been destroyed. It was rebuilt, and again has been destroyed, and again has been rebuilt, and is in the process once more of being destroyed. But this is an ill-fated expedition, but it's changing the whole balance of world forces. So really, to understand this, to see that, Zelensky